The Belfast Creative Coalition, the request for this year was $48,000. This is an increase of $8,000 from our current fiscal year of $40,000.
Michael?
So I've reached out to the Creative Coalition repeatedly over the last 2 months. I have not been able to get one response from them. I reread very carefully their, I'm sorry about my phone ringing. I have a really expensive phone that I can't figure out how to turn off the ringer. So, you know, my feeling is I would ask to table this. I think it was an important thing to have, as I spoke earlier about the four-legged stool. I think supporting the arts it's an odd, you know, without specific support, they often get lost in groups such as the Chamber of Commerce or the Economic Development Office or the Our Town Belfast. They have specific needs and a little more complex in many ways. That said, I'm open to the support. I think it's important, but I've been really disappointed that I haven't been able to get a single response either from the board or from the director. And, you know, I'm a little lost at this point.
Mary, then Brenda.
Brenda's hand was up first.
Well, thank you for that. Brenda and Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Just quickly, Mike, what specifically were you asking? What were you wanting to know? I'm curious. I have some thoughts of my own about the organization, but I just was wondering what you were trying to get from them when you were reaching out.
So specifically, as the pandemic kind of rose up, you know, I saw the city of Belfast, Our Town Belfast, and the Chamber of Commerce really leap into the fight. And the Creative Coalition was completely missing in action. Like, if you went to their Facebook page, there were like, you know, cutie little quotes about, you know, how artists make the light and, you know, totally unhelpful stuff if you were in the midst of, you know, your business and your art and your economic base of how you function was collapsing. I don't know why they weren't in it, because they never responded once to, and I'm good friends with the director. And so I'm really disappointed that not once did she respond to me or call me or reach out or anything. It's no pleasure on my part to have this conversation. I'd much rather be singing somebody's praises. But, you know, just as we were talking about when things go bad, there are people who rush to the site, and that didn't happen here. At least I don't know what they did, because they did not respond. You could look at anything they were doing nothing. And that's a great concern to me, because their job is, and you know, this is why I asked for, maybe we need to sit down and go over this again. But we give them $40,000 because, as far as I'm concerned, I see them as critical to the economic development platform for the people in the area of Belfast. And not, you know, all the extraneous stuff is great, but where I'm coming from, where I think the city has been coming from, is to support it as a leg of our economic development strategy. And what happened here was they went missing in action. I mean, for almost 2 months, they barely had they barely said a word. And, I think artists were, when you think of, many businesses had the Paycheck Protection Act, people were able to collect unemployment, but many self-employed people were completely lost at sea. And to me, the Creative Coalition could have been just copying and informing everybody what Zach was telling everybody, but they didn't even do that, So if you're an artist sitting at home, a self-employed creative of some sort, you were really left without a representative. And so that is and that is why I think we need to have that conversation. I'm not advocating not funding it. I think it's important to support the arts community, really important, because it is a more eclectic group and difficult to identify what they need and how to support them best. But I do think we need to have that conversation again with the Creative Coalition about what our expectation level is, what is it we're expecting them to do, and are they accountable? And my feeling was they were completely unaccountable, and to date they haven't responded yet, and that's unfortunate. So
thank you. So I feel the same way. I feel that I support the creative branch of Belfast because that's a very strong faction here in the community, but I would like to know more. I would like to best support that organization if that is the organization that represents artists at large. I don't know. We have Wonderful Arts. We have other organizations that do too, but $40,000 is a lot of money, obviously, and I think having a conversation is a good idea, just to know where they are, how we can help best, and so I would be interested in a conversation as well, with knowing that I support arts efforts to support the creators in the community here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I've got Mary and Paul, and I apologize, Mary, I'm not sure who raised their hand first, so I will defer to the two of you.
I think I'm next. So I want to add a little bit of information. I have been in communication with the director of the Belfast Creative Coalition over the last month, and I want to set some background premises. Belfast Creative Coalition has only had a part-time executive director since the beginning, where Out-of-Town Belfast and the Chamber have had full-time executive directors. That's a huge difference in what you can provide to an organization. That's number one. When the virus hit, the executive director was furloughed. And the other two organizations, the directors were still collecting paychecks and working on a different level. The other situation is the director lives in rural Maine, Waldo County, but rural, and is reliant at home on Hughes satellite for internet connectivity. If you're trying to live in this virus world, isolated, quarantined, whatever you want to call it, at home for 2 months, and you're dependent on Hughes internet for anything to connect you to the world, you don't want to be there. And the other two directors live here in Belfast, have offices here in Belfast, have great connectivity with the internet. So it wasn't an even playing field. And I think that we have to take that into consideration somewhere in this conversation. I do think that after 10 years, it's time for a refresh conversation, discussion about what our expectations are. And I hope that everybody read the full information that was submitted by them in our books. I have a number of emails that were just additional copies. I'm a member, sort of as New Year's by the Bay, of the Belfast Creative Coalition, so I'm on their emailing list, and I like the other organizations. I'm regularly going onto their website and various things they send out. So I may be in a little different place than you were, Michael. And so I think that it would be a really good idea if, and here's the other thing, other than staff member Thomas Kittredge, who is on the board of Belfast Creative Coalition, there is not a council member who serves on that board. And Neil, I know
that didn't get done. Yeah, it didn't get done because of the virus, but go ahead.
Okay, so, but up until then, there had not been, where previously Eric was on the board of the chamber, now Paul is, I've been on Our Town Belfast, there hasn't been a representative on the Belfast Creative Coalition board. That's a big difference. So I think that we're at a point that we have uneven playing fields, and we need to look at that, and that needs to be part of the discussion and the conversation. They have different funding sources other than the city money. Grants, they were writing grants is the big part of their funding. Their budget is actually $3,000 more than Our Town Belfast. I think it's time for a sit-down conversation with board representatives, with the executive director. And by the way, they have two newer people in positions in their organization, very part-time positions, but marketing, development, and programming, two relatively new people. And there's been a big change in the last year since those people have come on board with the organization. So I look forward to us collectively having a discussion and a refresh from our perspective. They had a refresh last fall. I think it's now time we had a refresh to get caught up and express what our expectations are.
Thank you. I've got Paul, then I'd like to speak briefly.
Well, I'd like to speak to after Paul.
Neil, after that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul?
Yeah. Okay. I had a chance to read the report. It's a great report, well written, a lot of information. They cover a lot of things every year. I've had some discussions with people. They've been working on surveys in and around the community, things like that. But the report I have is dated February 28th, and that's before the COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I have questions. And, you know, I'm looking at this and it says we appropriated 40,000 last year, and this year they're requesting 48. It's a wonderful report, but I'd also, now that we are into the COVID-19 and I'd like to hear more, have more of an update from the organization. I heard what Mary had to say, but I'm curious about what, if anything, they've done with the COVID response, how they've reached out or done their surveys or whatever with the people they represent. I think that's important. And I'd like to know a little bit more about that before I make a decision on this. This is a lot of money. Thank you.
Neil?
Thank you. Yes, I was asked to join the board, and just before this all hit heavy, and so there hasn't been any kind of a board meeting, so I've not officially been elected to the board. I can answer Paul's question right off the bat. Yes, they immediately sent out a survey to their members. How can we help you through this? What do you need from us? They didn't get a whole lot of response. Many of their members, a large percentage of their members are members of the chamber and Our Town Belfast, and so they didn't think they needed anything from the coalition. A large number of them are not people who make a living off of their art and didn't feel that they needed any help from those directions. So when you look at the overall picture, it's a little more complicated than that. But they did send out surveys and start making calls and trying to find out from people what they could do to help. And they did. I started working with them on the suggestion of a fundraising auction, which the mayor may want to speak about because he's been heavily involved with that. They are currently in the process of raising funds to help the artistic community through the crisis, and also to provide money for the Keep the Faith Fund. So could they have been more efficient? Yeah, absolutely. I think that Mary made some good points, but I think also one of the reasons why I wanted to get on the board and work with them is because structurally it's an organization that it has not been functioning well. And I agree, we ought to meet and have that discussion about what can be improved there. I do think that having a council representative there will make a big difference. But there's one thing I want to say. Where is it in their charter that they're an emergency response organization?
Not.
Where does it say you better have a pandemic plan or you better be ready to jump on an emergency? The fact that Zach did a fantastic job and the city staff did a fantastic job and the chamber was right there. Not everybody knew what to do or how they could help, and I'm not going to hold that against anybody. And again, I do think that basically, and they do have some new members, but from what I've seen working with them over the last few months, is it's basically a two-person organization at this point, and they're doing what they can, and they're pretty much hamstrung. So I think that we're all concerned about the COVID situation, and maybe and hopefully, I think one thing that'll change in society is that everybody, individuals, businesses, and organizations, are going to be aware that this kind of thing can happen much more intensely. But I think that, they weren't, to Paul's point of the $40,000 we gave them, we didn't give them $40,000 to be ready for a pandemic. We gave them $40,000 to deal with the things they ordinarily deal with, the art walks and all those kind of things. So I don't see where, I think we need to have the conversation about the efficiency in the organization and efficiency of communication between the city and the organization, but I don't think that that's about their budget. And I don't think they need to justify what would be a normal budget based on the virus situation.
Thank you, Neil. I'll say a couple of things here. I just did a weekend event with the group, and it was very coordinated that day. As you can imagine, probably 17 performers, all of this artwork, special props, of course, to Ned Leitner and Judy Erickson for co-producing. There's an extreme amount of value in this organization, or we wouldn't have supported it a long time ago. I think there are some areas of communication improvement. I think there are definitely, just looking at the numbers, our town Belfast is requesting 40, the chamber asked for 19, and Belfast Creative Coalition is asking for 48. To me, there's a number disparity, maybe very justified. We just need more communication. I go back to the Chamber of Commerce. Mike, you'd spoken about something and it brought to mind. The Chamber of Commerce has had its ebbs and flows over the past 10 or 15 years, and we've been witness to them. And right now, the Chamber of Commerce is in a very, very much stronger spot than it was 10 years ago. Again, personal opinions, but sometimes when you're mayor, you get to say what you think. And I think it's in a better spot than it was. And I know we've had some issues with the chamber in the past that we don't have now, but we have new issues. Every organization has issues. I see the Belfast Creative Coalition much like I saw the chamber 10 years ago, a very valuable leg of the stool. But somehow we're not understanding the value and or the communication. To Michael's points, we should have had more. He should have gotten a response, absolutely. But having said that, we as a council have been in this spot before with other organizations in town. So my hope is that we remember that, put the dollar amount request aside for now. I would suggest if it would be so approved, that we pick 2 council members between now and June 9th to go out, meet with the executive director and whoever else, get some understandings, and come back with some more information between now and June 9th. I would also say, God love Neil for joining the board, because they definitely need that. They need Neil. They also need a council member. He's both. But that just happened. So a lot of things are right in the middle of situational flux. And then we had the freaking virus. And the virus shut down a lot of people. And creative people who typically don't ask for help, they only want to perform for peanuts, that's what they do, or sell their paintings for peanuts. This organization, as we broached it 5, 6, 7 years ago when it was first started, was intended to bring that band of artists together to have a loose collective that they could report to, and that organization could report to us and the community about. That was the original vision. Maybe it's changed somewhat, but again, I would vote, and Neil's on the board, so I wouldn't suggest him, for example, because he's going to be on the board. But I mean, somebody like Brenda and Mary or Paul, Mike, I don't know. I think you deserve some answers too. But I think that we need, between now and June 9th, a little more information before we were to approve any expenditures today, to find out what's going on and how we can help. Because that's what we did with the chamber. And we haven't had to do that with our town, Belfast, yet. But the day that Zach decides to go to greener pastures, we will. So anyway, sorry to be so blunt, but there you go. That's my idea and thoughts. And I'll accept any feedback from the council.
I can meet if you want me. I will volunteer to talk to the executive director if that can be a thing. I don't know. Phone call perhaps is the most logical. I don't know. Just but if she wants to do Zoom, which doesn't sound like it's really feasible, actually, or whatever, or outside 10 feet away, whatever. I'm fine. I can meet. I can meet before June 9th.
Mary? Paul?
All right. I'm also willing to talk to the director by phone. I'd like to know a little bit more about what's going on. So that would be a big help for me.
Mary?
So I've already had many communications. Brenda, I actually think with her art background would be excellent in terms of meeting. And if I was going to pick a second, it was going to be Neil to me, because he's not that deep into the organization. And I think that that would be a good team, he and Brenda, in delving into this a little bit to bring us back information other than my own perspective.
It's all fine by me. I was just asking the council. Michael?
Yeah, I would support Neil and Brenda, but I would also say, it's not helpful, Mary, if you've been having conversations with people for a month, not to be reporting back to the council who has not had any of those conversations. It would be helpful for me to have heard this before, sometime in the last month. To the people who are going to represent us at this discussion, I hope in particular, the main thrust for our support for the Creative Coalition is that we're trying to support the economic engines of Belfast. That's why it's that is to me, why we're not giving Ando Anderson $40,000 and why we're giving the Creative Coalition $40,000. And for instance, Mary just said, oh, they were furloughed. That is the first time I've ever heard that. And we should have heard that previously. They should have informed us of that. And while I am, I don't think of Swanville as deepest rural Maine, but I guess Hughes internet isn't that great. But I do think, the United States Post Office has been working, and there was no reason they couldn't have written us a letter and mailed it to us. So, the few things that I really want to see come out of this are the absolute importance of what they do for the Belfast creative economy and for the artists, that broad arts community that they serve, but also the requirement for communication. I appreciate they were talking to Mary, but they were not communicating with the city of Belfast when they're talking to one councillor, and nobody else knows what's going on. And meanwhile, we're asking questions, and they're not responding to those questions.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to call on Brenda, but I just want to say it. I have to leave to go get the bread, but it looks to me I would be very happy with Neil and Brenda going if the council is okay, if Neil's okay with that.
Yeah, I'm
I
fine.
just think there's a way out here. If you look at the past, we've been here before, and we can work together to get everybody, all 5 of you, satisfied. And the dollar amount, I don't know what it is, but the satisfaction of the communication and things like that. I am an expert at internet communications in the state of Maine because currently I have 47 people working remotely from home. And I can assure you, there are internet issue companies out there. But anyway, God love you guys. I'll see you too. Brenda, go.
I just wanted to say, why don't I reach out to the executive director, Neil, if that's okay with you, and ask her, propose that the 3 of us talk.
We
have
can
a
Zoom.
meeting, whatever
She
the
can
setup
Zoom.
is, if she can, okay, I'll ask her what's best for her, and then
Okay.
we'll go from there. Does that sound like a good strategy?
Sounds fine.
All right.
Okay, we lost Paul.
Yes, we did.
Yep, we lost
Okay.
Paul, and
All right.
he usually this sometimes happens with him.
Yeah,
I'm sure he'll jump back in.
Yeah.
And the mayor is out of here to make his weekly bread delivery.
Okay. All right. I'll be. I have to step away for just a minute, but I'll be right back. So please continue.
Okay, great. But we will. So we'll have Brenda and Neil do that, and then if you could report back, be ready to report back at our meeting on the 9th. And I will do the same regarding the Belfast Summer Nights. How does that? We'll revisit this page on that night.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll leave that one on tabled for now. The next line is the